tough to digest. Good to have you with us on this Thursday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. I'm sure you, like me and millions of others, watched the debate last night on CNN. And we can, pick this apart until the cows come home. There's no question about it. But there was something that unfolded last night in the debate that I found more than interesting and very pertinent to the discussion. The Republicans couldn't get enough on what to do in the Middle East last night through the theme of the debate. That they are the ones on security. Obama's got it wrong. The Democrats are weak. Hillary and Sanders, of course, Sanders' name was never mentioned, but the Democrats in no way have a safe plan for America. And it got into a discussion about judgment. Most of the debate last night was on the Middle East, which I found at times above Trump's head. But the fact is that the history revisionism was taking place when a discussion about judgment and who has the best judgment on how to run the country on what to do. Very provocative question by Tapper, no question about it. And this is what Trump had to say to Jeb Bush standing next to him.
Your brother and your brother's administration gave us Barack Obama because it was such a disaster those last 3 months that Abraham Lincoln couldn't have been elected.
You know what? As it relates to my brother, there's one thing I know for sure. He kept us safe. I don't know if you remember, Donald.
Now, in the Reagan Library, the traditional Republicans are going to go nuts when they hear that. But it's almost as if this whole stage is to mop up what was wrong with the Republicans. Let me remind this country and all of you out there that I am one broadcaster that is going to pound my fist right on the table because this is what happened. Bush did not keep us safe. We got hit on his watch. We got hit on Cheney's watch. Who was the president on September 11th, 2001? What was the presidential daily briefing of August 6, 2001, when counterintelligence agencies had briefed the president telling him that terrorists were going to hijack commercial planes and they wanted to fly them into buildings? What did Bush do? He went back to Crawford, Texas, where he got that briefing and continued to chop wood. This idea that we did not get hit on Bush's watch is totally false. And it's misleading a lot of young Americans, and it's history revisionism. We were then told that Saddam Hussein had WMD. We were lied to. We were taken into a war of choice, not of a war of necessity. But this idea that Jeb is out there trying to reinvent his brother's legacy. Bush was stupid. He was lazy. He didn't listen to his people, and we got hit on his watch. And for him to come back and say, well, I'll tell you what our brother did. He kept us safe. Okay? We didn't get hit after 9/11, but we did an invasion we didn't have to do. We did operations in Afghanistan that lasted for over 10 years, and he never got Osama bin Laden. The next president had to get him, and that, of course, is Barack Obama, who they claim hasn't done anything right in foreign policy. So this idea that we didn't get hit on Bush's watch is a lie. It's another lie. They're cooking up a new generational lie to a bunch of young 20-somethings who are now in the process, who were very young on September 11th, 2001, and are now being told that Bush kept us safe, and the Republicans can keep us safe, and the Republicans know more about policy of the Middle East. No. This is about mopping up the Bush legacy. And the problem here in all of this is that the mainstream media is afraid of the Clintons and they're afraid of the Bushes. They won't take them to the firewall. They won't take them to task because of their political might and their political power and their families' positions in this country. And that's where the failure comes down. For Jake Tapper or Hugh Hewitt, whoever the hell he is, and Dana Bash to sit there and not remind Jeb Bush that, well, wait a minute, we did get hit on your brother's watch. After that, we were safe. After we went into military operations. But no, the due diligence of security on this country was not done, and it was not properly done. And I just think that this is a key point here. It wasn't until we got hit, the incompetence of Bush and Cheney brought us to a whole new level of security in this country. Now we're listening to people's phone calls. Now we have a big fight over the Fourth Amendment. Now we have a very intrusive Patriot Act that we've had to debate over and over again. Now we've spent millions upon millions and trillions of dollars billions of dollars when it comes to security. Now we're feeling people up in airports. And oh, by the way, in the middle of the immigration debate last night, no one mentioned that we have deported more criminals than fourfold over the Bush administration under Barack Obama. And nowhere was it stated last night that we have resourced the border fourfold from what Bush was doing, yet we still have to do more, and their big idea is an unbelievable wall that certainly is going to be magical. That is the truth. The fact is we got hit on Bush's watch, and Bush did not keep us safe. Now, the most entertaining thing of the night was following Senator Bernie Sanders on Twitter. I did not. I'm not a Twitter guy. I can't take the nastiness of people. I don't need it in my life. But apparently the young techies have got Bernie sitting on the couch last night and tweeting out, and some of them are just so profound and stunning and hilarious, for that matter. The senator and candidate for president from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, joins us when we come back here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Back on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Good to have you with us. Let's go right to it. The candidate from Vermont, the independent, who is leading in both Iowa and New Hampshire, Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Ed.
Senator, I'm sure you, like millions of Americans, watched the CNN debate last night, and many people are entertained, but also profoundly, not so much entertained, but also profoundly taken by some of the tweets that you and your team put out last night from sitting on the couch, which I think is great. The first one that caught our attention was about poverty, and it reads, have you heard anyone use the word poverty yet? 47.7 million Americans living in poverty, no discussion. The next one, waiting. Will we hear anything about racial justice, income inequality, or making college affordable? Did the Republicans miss the mark last night, Senator?
I really think they did. Look, it goes without saying that my views are very different than theirs. But if you take a hard look at what the real issues facing the American people are and what people are really concerned about, there was almost no discussion about them. For example, the middle class is in rapid decline, and we are seeing massive income and wealth inequality. Did you hear one word about that? We got 30 million people in this country that have no health insurance at all. Not one word about that. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country. No discussion about that. So I think, Citizens United. We have a corrupt campaign finance system. Not one suggestion that maybe we may want to overturn that disastrous Supreme Court decision. Mm-hmm. On climate change, well, they did talk about it, but what they told us is that while the scientific community is loud and clear that this is a planetary crisis, they have zero nothing significant to say about transforming our energy system. So,
well, the only thing they had to say was that they don't want to let the leftists and the liberals and the environmentalists destroy our economy,
right?
Which they don't understand the dynamic of how many jobs shifting attention to the climate would actually create in this country. In the meantime, Marco Rubio is in total denial while Miami continues to be underwater and threatened as a city. But you're right. Nothing about income inequality, nothing about social justice or race. Trade and jobs never got mentioned other than they think that they can create them. And on a day where it was announced that 9 million people have got health care, all they could talk about was repealing it.
Absolutely right. And the other thing, I mean, again, beyond belief, I just don't know how dumb they think the American people are that they can get away with this. All of the problems facing this country are attributable to Barack Obama. They forgot to mention that when Bush left office, we were hemorrhaging 800,000 jobs a month. Our financial system was on the verge of collapse, and we were running a $1.4 trillion deficit. Somehow or another, Ed, it seems to have skipped their mind that was the reality when Obama came to office.
Well, Senator, the backdrop of that is the Reagan Library, and, of course, the sacred commandment of the Republicans is don't rip into another Republican. And I think that had a lot to do with it. In fact, Huckabee was just absolutely just showering comments over how wonderful the whole crew was last night. The fact is that they're out of touch. They can't go to war fast enough. Now, I want to ask you a direct question. If you're president with the dynamic that's playing out right now with Russia, would you go face-to-face with Vladimir Putin?
Look, I think what you need to do is to bring the world together. Do I think that it is important for there to be real dialogue with Russia to understand that their aggressive behavior is unacceptable? Absolutely. But this is what I do believe, and it's a lesson that we have got to learn from the disastrous war in Iraq. We need coalition politics. We need to bring countries around the world together to put pressure on Russia and any other aggressive nation. But as I have said many, many times, Ed, war should be the last resort of a major and great country like ours, not the first response.
Okay, so we did bring the world together in the P5+1 with the agreement with the Iranians, and all of them want to trash the deal. Your thoughts?
Well, you're right. Every single one of them, well, I would say what Kasich was not for totally trashing it, but, he was against it. That's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Implicit in what all of them are saying, or they didn't use the word war, if you're going to tear to shreds, I think Ted Cruz's language, this agreement, what are your options? What options remain if you believe, as most of us believe, that Iran should not get a nuclear weapon? If you're going to tear to shreds the agreement that prevents them from getting a nuclear weapon, but does it in a way that does not go to war, what are your options that are left? And the answer is war. And I cannot believe, and I think it is enormously troubling, that after the disastrous war in Iraq, that these guys still see war as the only approach to solving international problems. And that is just a very dangerous attitude.
So how would you capsulize the debate? An out-of-touch night for America?
I think really, number one, if you sit down and you ask the American people what the issues are of most concern to them, these guys, by and large, did not talk about them. And when they did talk about them, they were way out of touch. For example, immigration is an important issue. Happens that most Americans think in one way or another there should be a path toward citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people. Not these guys, not one of them up there on the stage.
Senator, from maybe a comical perspective, did you find yourself talking to the TV last night?
I tell you what, I honestly found. I was watching this thing and I was tweeting for 2.5 hours, and I was feeling more and more drained. The energy, I was trying to pay attention. It did not make a whole lot of sense to me. The energy was just flowing out of my body. I was exhausted, and finally I gave up. At the end of 2.5 hours, I said, "This is it. I'm out of here." It was not. It's one thing to have disagreements with people, Ed. That's called democracy.
Yeah.
But these guys are so out of touch, I think, with where the American people are coming from, that it was really painful to watch.
Okay, you say social justice. I want to say race relations. They act as if there's no issues here whatsoever.
Did you hear one word of that last night?
No, I didn't. And I think that has been one of the most prominent stories that's out there. Nothing about Black Lives Matter. Not that that's the driving force, but it is a big story, but also just the underpinning and the foundation of the crumbling of society that we've seen, such things that have happened with police shootings and what unfolded in Ferguson. It's almost like it was just swifted under the table as not a pressing question. Nothing about education of what we really need to do to make America great again, so to speak, Mr. Trump. All right, now, I do want to talk about your campaign and give you a chance. In the most recent poll, you received 49% of support among registered independents and new voters compared to Clinton's 26%. I think that's the most striking number that's been out there so far about your campaign. Your thoughts?
Well, thanks for noticing that. I think a lot of media does not notice it. Here is the point. The point is that if we are going to win this election, not only the White House, but retake the United States Senate, do well in the House, get governor's seats back, clearly we need a level of enthusiasm and energy all across this country, which currently does not exist within the Democratic Party. That's the simple truth.
So are you bringing new people to the process?
Ed, absolutely. I mean, just go with me to any of our large rallies. The majority of the people there are young people, and I'm very proud of that. So I think we are bringing new energy and excitement into the political process. That means a larger voter turnout. That means we win in November.
Senator, there isn't one poll out there yet by any of the mainstream media, any of the corporate media, that has you questioned head-to-head against Republicans. Your reaction to that?
Well, there were a few a while back, but they seem to have stopped it. I found that interesting, and I'm glad you picked up on it. Some of the polls way back when had me winning, defeating most of the Republican candidates, and sometimes 2 out of 3. I think there's a reluctance on the part of some corporate media maybe to show that a Bernie Sanders can take on and defeat the major Republican candidates, and I think that is the case. But let's also add, when we talk about the campaign, that what polls also tell us, which I believe to be true, is you got 25, 30, 35% of the American people who don't know who Bernie Sanders is or what he stands for. And as we get out around the country, and more people know that we are fighting for the middle class, are prepared to take on the billionaire class, I think our strength is only going to grow.
And finally, Senator, your response to Jeb Bush last night saying that George Bush kept us safe. It's my recollection we got hit on their watch.
That's right. No, absolutely, God. I mean, yes, I certainly agree with that. But in general, not only did 9/11 occur on their watch, but they took us into Iraq, which will go down in history, I think, as one of the most disastrous foreign policy blunders in the history of the United States of America. Sad to say.
Senator Bernie Sanders on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Senator, thanks for your time. Keep up the fight.
All right, you too, Ed. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. This is brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team, and we are back with Bob Shrum right after this.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Appreciate the download. You'll get it at wegotit.com, rawstory.com, and ringofireradio.com. Okay, everybody's looking for a winner. Well, it was certainly a much improved performance last night by some of the Republican candidates. I've got someone who I thought did make the greatest gains, and let's see what Bob Shrum thinks. Democratic strategist, professor at USC. Bob, good to have you with us.
Glad to be here, Ed.
Your thoughts. What'd you watch last night?
Well, first of all, Republicans in general, especially the Republican establishment, a lot of the press, want to say that Donald Trump was the big loser. I'm not sure that's right. So much of the debate centered on him. I thought his exchange with Bush on George W. Bush was a very powerful moment. The Republicans at the Reagan Library applauded when he defended George W. Bush. I don't think Americans sitting out there watching that debate, or even Republicans for that matter, Republican voters, feel that way about George W. Bush. So, I think Trump was Trump. And writing him off or saying he had a bad night would be, in my view, to repeat the same mistake that was made when he criticized John McCain several other times. I mean, he's there, and I think he's going to be a force.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you on that, Bob. The only thing that I think his soft underbelly last night was Middle East policy. It seemed that whole discussion seemed to go over his head a little bit. He was not impressive when talking about it, and his answer is that he's very militaristic, and people will respect us, and he'll have the strongest military on the planet. I mean, that's how he gets around how he would deal with the pressing issues that we're facing in the Middle East. Other than that, I thought Trump was just fine last night.
I think that's true. I think Carly Fiorina gave a very strong performance. The truth of the matter is she was a terrible CEO. Trump is right about that. But she came across very effectively in that debate, and she came across very effectively in that moment she had with Trump when she, in essence, criticized what he had said about her appearance.
Yeah.
And all he could say was, well, Carly, I think you have a beautiful face. So I think she came across well. Marco Rubio is actually quite smooth. He didn't get much of a chance to talk, and so I'm not sure he left much of an impression with people.
Well, let's talk about Fiorina. The thing that impressed me about her is I'm looking for a candidate to tell me, what are you going to do? And she did answer that when it came to foreign policy if she was the commander-in-chief. Here it is.
You have not heard a plan about Iran from any politician up here. Here's my plan. On day one in the Oval Office, I will make 2 phone calls. The first to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu to reassure him we will stand with the state of Israel. The second to the Supreme Leader to tell him that unless and until he opens every military and every nuclear facility to real anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not his, we, the United States of America, will make it as difficult as possible to move money around the global financial system. We can do that. We don't need anyone's cooperation to do it.
Now, Bob, a man who's been around campaigns his entire career, your thoughts on that answer? There's no BS there. If someone's sitting at home watching and paying attention to this, they just found out what she would do if she was in charge. Is that a good thing?
Well, there's apparently no BS. There's actually underneath it a lot of BS. First of all, it's a mischaracterization of the Iran agreement. The only place where there's a delay on the inspection is with one plant, and the International Atomic Energy Agency supervises that inspection. It's not done simply by the Iranians.
So Cruz was wrong last night in his statement about the deal.
Yeah, well, he's wrong all the time. I mean, Pat Moynihan used to say everybody's entitled to their own opinions, no one's entitled to their own facts. Cruz always has his own facts.
Yeah.
Secondly, when Fiorina says we would make it very difficult for them to move money around the world and we can do it with all on our own, she's wrong. We can't do it without the cooperation of the Europeans. If they refuse to cooperate, what's she going to do, apply sanctions to Europe? I mean, you would create an economic disaster unlike anything we've seen since the Great Depression if you did that. You would divide the entire world, and the U.S. would be isolated. So I think she's crisp, she's effective. People sitting at home, you're absolutely right. Listen to her and say, gee, she has a plan. It's just a disastrous plan. Now, that's not going to be exposed in a Republican debate. It would be exposed, I think, in a general election debate.
What about Kasich and the Ohio factor? How did he try to come across as a uniter last night?
It's probably hurts him to the extent any Republicans are listening to this show. But if there had to be a Republican president out of this crew, I guess I'd pick Kasich. I disagree with him on a whole host of issues, but he tries to be reasonable. He tries to see the other side. As you suggest, he tries to be a uniter. If he could get the Republican nomination, he could be quite formidable, because I think it would be very difficult to beat him in Ohio, and Ohio is one of the two critical states that we have to carry.
Income inequality, trade and jobs, repeal health care, and nothing about race. Your thoughts?
Well, repeal health care is kind of a ritualistic requirement to enter the Republican contest. You've got to say repeal health care. And I suppose Cruz would actually do it. I'm not sure some of these other people, if they got into office, would dare to do it. They would do something that they called repeal that didn't take health care away from millions of people. If they did take it away from millions of people, there would be a tremendous backlash. Race, I don't understand why there was no question from CNN on the issue of race.
Mm-hmm. Especially as much as they cover it on a daily basis.
Yes.
Final question. Did Scott Walker revitalize his campaign in any sense of the word last night?
No, he's as flat as a punctured bicycle tire. He's gone. I don't see him coming back at all. He's, and I think you and I talked about this earlier this year. The real question was whether or not this guy was out of his depth. I thought he was. I think he's proved that he's out of his depth.
Bob Shrum, always great to visit. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Ed. Bye.
You bet. Professor at USC, Democratic strategist Bob Shrum. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We're back tomorrow.